Welcome back to the Spicy Take Sports Podcast. We got the boys together today. How y'all doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing good. I'm excited for this podcast. This will be a little bit different. We aren't doing our typical weekly podcast. We're doing a special little podcast with it being one of the most unique parts of the sports season, where we literally have baseball playoffs, the NFL regular season, college football regular season, the NBA starting up, hockey starting up, and college basketball coming up in about 2 weeks. This is a very rare occurrence that we get. It happens once a year for like a couple week period. So it's kind of an awesome, exciting thing. So, and also the NASCAR playoffs are coming out the last 3 races right now. So, I mean, you got a bunch of really big sports events going on right now. So we thought we'd go ahead and, with us all having different teams for the most part, we're deciding we're going to go ahead and break down what were our best moments, our worst moments, and the biggest what ifs of our sports fandom that we either think about of how happy we were, how mad we were, or what if this happened, how much happier would I be? So we're going to start with the best moments, and I'll let Caleb go ahead and start.
So I was thinking in descending order, 3, 2, and 1. So for number 3, I think I would list it as it's kind of debating this one. I think it has to be the Blackhawks when they won the championship in the early 2000s. I'm trying to remember what year it was here because they won a couple back then too. Weirdly enough, I did not pay attention to the 2015 one, but and I was kind of too young to really care about the one that was in. Sorry, I had to look up what year it was just to make sure.
Yeah, good.
We won in okay, so 2009. It was the 2012 and 2013 season that I best remember. My dad was a big hockey fan. Kind of at the end of that kind of run, he got into it right when the Kane and Taves era began in Chicago. For those hockey fans out there, and we didn't really watch the 2009-2010 one because it was a little bit of a surprising run that we made to the Cup. We weren't really favored at the very beginning, and then we got better at the very end. And in 2012-2013, we were an established powerhouse by that point that got a lot of TV airtime, and so we watched a lot of their games that year, and we watched their run to the Cup. So definitely that one was up there, and it fed an interest in hockey that's kind of started to get bigger and bigger as the years have gone along, and I'd say now is my second favorite sport behind football to watch. So that one. Number 2. I think number 2 would have to be, this is kind of a weird pick, honestly, but the run the table year for the Packers in 2015. I had gotten to the point at that point where I was finding ways to stream Packers preseason games. So I was streaming the Packers preseason game, and I distinctly remember the play where Jordy Nelson tore his ACL against Pittsburgh. And I was, a relatively young fan at the time being, and I just thought the season's over. Like, we're done. Rodgers' favorite target is gone. What's even the point at this point? Just pack it in. And then we ended up starting 4-6. And I remember we lost to the Washington, at the time, Redskins, really bad in their home stadium. And then Rodgers made that comment, and it was just this magical run of wins to end the season. 6 wins straight in a row, and against a lot of good teams at the time being. I mean, the Sam Bradford-led Vikings were a good team, and the Lions were good that year, and a couple other things. That was just a really fun time to watch that team kind of gel and mold together. I mean, they ended up getting their butts kicked in the playoffs, but it was still on one of the most craziest games of all time against Arizona, where you see a Hail Mary at the very end of the game to tie it up before Larry Fitzgerald goes 75 yards to like the 2-yard line in overtime, which that part was pretty disappointing, but it was crazy that we got there at all. And then number 1 is clearly doesn't really need any introduction. It's the Packers winning the Super Bowl. It was really cool to see all the different contributors that we had that year. And we were a 6 seed back when being a 6 seed meant something. And distinctly on that run, my 2 favorite games, because even more so than the Super Bowl was awesome and all, but beating the Falcons in their home stadium when they were favored so heavily and just trouncing them by 27 points.
Colton's so sad.
I'm sorry, Colton, but it was awesome. The Tremont Williams pick six at the end of the first half. I distinctly remember that.
I remember that game vividly because that was like, was that 2011?
It was like the 2010-2011 season. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first year we were actually good since the whole Vic situation. So it was like, yeah.
Weren't you guys I think you were the number one overall seed because you were playing us. Yeah.
The 1 or 2. So probably more than likely the 1.
Yeah, it was Michael Turner and Roddy White, Falcons.
Yeah, and that was Matt Ryan's like second year in the league, something like that.
Second or third, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had John Abraham rushing the passer back then. I saw it because I was thinking about it this week. This is what brought it to mind too. Abraham sacked Rodgers like in the third quarter, and he did like the mock championship belt over Rodgers, and that's when we like started scoring points after that even more. So we were up by like 7 before we ended up winning by 27 after that. It's like, it's not a great idea to be down and then be mocking the other quarterback who's on fire for.
Yeah, that's not smart, but okay.
But so that one, and yeah, I mean that kind of ends my 3. That was a pretty magical run. And also my favorite moment from that entire playoff series was 330-pound BJ Raji picking off Caleb Haney and running it into the end zone and then doing like the fat boy dance where he like started doing the jelly belly in a circle in the back of the end zone.
I hate the Packers, and that was pretty funny. All right, you want to do it or me go with Colton?
You can go ahead and go.
All right, so my best moments. My number 3, had a lot of debate about number 3. There was the top 2 are the obvious top 2 for me. My third was pretty close. I could have picked the UCF undefeated year. I could have picked a couple other things. I went with the 2014 Kentucky basketball run. As we get closer to the college basketball season, you'll see that I'm a lot bigger college basketball fan than I've let it on so far. It's been my favorite sport my whole life, pretty much, because growing up in Tennessee or Kentucky, that's kind of like on that Kentucky-Tennessee line, and being with family of all Kentucky people. That kind of is what the sport is there. You're either Kentucky or a Louisville fan, and that you stick with it your whole life. My family's all Kentucky fans, so that 2014 Kentucky run was the reason it's one of my best ones. We didn't win the national championship. We made it to the game. The reason it was so amazing to me is because that team was so hyped up, and they had Sports Illustrated covers saying 40-0 question mark. And they start out the season with like 6 losses in their first like 12 games. And it's like, oh God. And a bunch of freshmen. And then they end up regrouping throughout the year. And they almost beat the number 1 team in the country in Florida in the SEC championship game. James Young slipped on a potential game winner and cost us the game.
I remember that game, actually. I watched Gators basketball back then.
It was a heck of a game. But everyone knew Kentucky was looking like a lot better team. So people were saying probably a 5 or a 6 seed. They get put in the tournament as an 8 seed. Not only do they get put in the tournament as an 8 seed, they end up in the bracket with the 1 seed of Wichita State, who hadn't lost a game all year. They end up in the bracket with the 4 seed of Louisville, who was their biggest rival. End up in a bracket with the number 2 seed in Michigan, who people thought was going to be a 1 seed. And on the side with Wisconsin, who played the anti-Kentucky basketball. A bunch of white guys that can shoot. But Kentucky found a way as an 8 seed to go. I mean, they beat Kansas State in the first game, which started out a little bit rough because it started out weird because before the game even started, Kansas State started the game with they dunked in layup lines, so Kentucky got a free throw to start the game, which is really weird in my opinion. But either way, it was kind of magical from that point on. Go all the way to the national championship game, they just run out of gas. I mean, 3 game winners from Aaron Harrison in a row was insane. They just ran out of gas in that national championship game. And my number 2 was the Kentucky National Championship in 2012. It would be my number 1, but I don't feel like there was as much of an insane, like, oh my God moment in that tournament, because Kentucky was just the best team far and away than everyone else in the country that year. If they didn't win the championship, it would have been extremely disappointing. And I mean, Anthony Davis was another animal in college. So it was the best team in the country, and they actually pulled it off. And number one was the Minneapolis Miracle. I've never experienced a moment where my emotions had fallen off a table and then been picked right back up. I mean, it wasn't just even that one play. I mean, if you go back and look at that game, Minnesota was leading that game. Wasn't 17-0 at halftime? I think that's what it was, against the Saints. And the Saints come all the way back, take a what was it? It was 21-20 lead. And then the Vikings went down and got a 54-yard field goal to make it 23-21. And the Vikings defense crapped the bed again. We fell behind 24-23 because we gave a field goal. And then the first play looked awful. And then the second play, just insanity happened. I mean, I remember watching the play and really saying, this is what I watched this team go 13-3 for this crap. And then Diggs goes up and catches it, which first off, that was a heck of a play as it was. And if he just decides to step out of bounds, you give yourself a chance to win the game on a field goal. But as a Vikings fan, you never want to give the ball to your field goal kicker for a game in the playoffs. But I'm still, at the time, I'm shouting at the TV, get out of bounds, get out of bounds. What are you doing? And then Marcus Williams goes right by Diggs. And he turns around and there's no one behind him. I'm like, oh my God. And so I go nuts. Joe Buck actually got excited for a play call. And
as everyone said, that was one of the craziest playoff plays I've seen in almost any sport. That was ridiculous. That was truly amazing.
The Minneapolis Miracle is up there with, I guess, Rodgers' Hail Mary in Detroit, probably. And the David Tyree helmet catch, like those are all like synonymous to me.
Mm-hmm.
The Music City Miracle up there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's certain plays that stand out, and that'll be one that always stands out for me. I mean, Diggs will always have a soft place in my heart, even after how he left Minnesota. I'm always going to love Diggs for that moment. Colton, what's your best moment?
So I got to start off by saying I still have officially not seen any of my teams win a championship. So this is my best moments are all moments of being oh so close. So as an Orlando Magic fan, all right, this is going to be all right, I'm just going to start.
That's the 08 run with Howard?
Yeah, my third moment, I just really got me into sports was when we moved to Orlando 2007, and that's when the Magic were good. We had Dwight Howard. My first jersey in his sport was Hito Turkoglu. So I remember that as a young kid having a Magic jersey. I thought it was really cool. I didn't want Dwight Howard. I just wanted Hito. Anyways, beside the fact. So, we were in Tampa going to Busch Gardens. We were watching it was game 6 against young LeBron. And I'm pretty sure the game was in Orlando. And it was a good, pretty solid series. I mean, neither team was going to beat LA, but it was just kind of cool seeing my team go to a championship series. And with the core they had, I mean, all it was really Dwight, and then, Rashard Lewis, Hito Turkoglu, a young JJ Redick, who just retired and has been in the league for absolutely ever now. But Jameer Nelson, I mean, just guys that you don't really hear about anymore, except Dwight somehow still in the league. But yeah, that was the main year that really started getting into sports, or at least into basketball more so than anything. And with my second memory, it's probably it's obviously my favorite team, but I would say the 2018 Rose Bowl and Georgia beat Oklahoma to go to the national championship game. At that point, I waited 20 years to see Georgia in the national championship. And
that was a hell of a game, too.
Yeah, and it was a heck of a game, and it was the most un-Georgia sports thing ever because they were down 17 points, almost going into halftime. And then there was a squib kick by Lincoln Riley, and Georgia got a short field, kicked the field goal, and that ended up being the difference in the game because it went to overtime. So, I mean, with that said, it was a roller coaster game. It was tied, was it 40? Was it like 45-45? And Georgia had to get a late drive by their true freshman to go down 80 yards, 75 yards down the field with about a minute and some change left. Granted, he has 2 NFL running backs in that backfield, but I mean, that's still gutsy to do as a true freshman. And for Georgia to win that game, and then the way that the way they blocked the field goal in overtime. So Michelle ran around the corner. I mean, I'll never forget the call that I think it was Chris Fowler made the call.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. Is there Fowler or Reese Davis? But yeah, that has to be number 2 for me. I mean, I'll get later down the road what happened in that next game. That's my worst, but we'll get that later. But and then number 1 for me, it was my first time seeing my team in championship, like going to the final game or final series in 8 years, is when the Falcons destroyed the bad man Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship in 2017. It kind of started a trend of even more choking for my teams. After that, it was all downhill. 144-21. Julio Jones, as an elite receiver he is, had an amazing game.
The forever memory of that game will be him stiff arming Clinton Dix into oblivion on the way of that 75-yard touchdown run or whatever it was. I turned the game off after that. I was like, I'm not going to watch anymore. I was just too sad.
I was never the same either after that.
Exactly. And it was funny because Elijah knows Michael, one of my really good friends from high school in a fantasy league. And I remember like a couple days before that game, he was texting me and calling me like, Aaron Rodgers is he's a bad man. He's bad. And he's going to destroy the Falcons. And then right as they went up, like, I don't know, by a couple touchdowns, I started yelling, he's a bad man to Michael, and Michael wasn't saying anything. So I don't mind the Packers. It was just funny in that moment because like he was just trash talking the Falcons all week and so close, but yeah. Anyway,
we're never to trash talk.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was nervous because obviously it's Aaron Rodgers. He's the most talented quarterback I've seen personally. I mean, we have Mahomes now. We'll see what he turns, his final career. But yeah, so those are my top 3. All games, series sent to the final dance, but never actually won it. So hopefully that can change in a week and a half. But hold your breath. So I'm not going to get my hopes up too much. But all right, so Elijah, we're going to go with the worst now, right?
Yeah.
I do like one. I was thinking like we do one worst and then follow it right up with our hypothetical.
That's okay.
Because sometimes they can tie in too. I mean, personally, that's what I was going to say. Like for me, so like my biggest, my worst memory by far is the 2014 NFC Championship loss to Seattle. I mean, everything from what Russell Wilson had 3 interceptions at halftime. I think we were up like 15 or 17 or something like that at the half.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
then
remember where I was at for that game. I was in Cracker Barrel with the family, and I'm looking and I'm like, what the heck? The Seahawks came back here.
I mean,
there were so many bad calls that we made.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I was saying I watched a game like a sports store. Like a sports store is they had like a little TV, and I was like, because I was
Sports Authority.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted the Packers to win so bad because oh my gosh, the Seahawks, and that during that time, they were that team that was like they're going to win almost every year, but.
So that one is definitely the worst. I mean, and the worst part of that. So, you could say that like the ending of it was the worst. And you could say that even the onside kick that we didn't recover was the worst, but I'm going to go with an original one instead, or more original. That fake like field goal that they threw it for a touchdown. And again, Clinton Dix, like just stood there and watched the ball go over his head to like a 3rd string tight end will forever be burned in my memory. I think, I mean, I was 2014. I was like 15 or 16 at the time being. I let out a litany of unsavory words that was not in my vocabulary at the time being. Like, it truly boggles my mind still to this day. And so, because I was leading into that, I mean, if we had won that game, my what if is how does that go against the Patriots then? Because I feel like we had the better team than Seattle at the time being. Russell was young. They didn't really have a passing game. And we were multifaceted. We had a running game with Lacey, and we had Jordy and Cobb. And that year we beat the Patriots in our home stadium in Lambeau. We beat them by a touchdown or 10 points, actually. So I feel very confident that we could have pulled off another win again. So, I mean, that's the biggest what if for sure for me. My second disappointment, honestly, is actually last year with the Buccaneers. I wasn't really, as a Packers fan, you can't really ever get your hope up that you're going to win an NFC championship game because at this point we've been to so many of them and lost so many of them, and you're playing Tom Brady that I kind of just assumed going into the week that we were going to lose. But then we get to game time, and to find out game time decision, Antonio Brown isn't playing, and neither is Antoine Winfield. And I'm like, okay, that's two pretty big pieces, particularly Winfield on their defense that aren't playing. And then we get into the second quarter, and again, we're kind of in a tight game at the time being, but then their other starting safety, Jordan Whitehead, went out. So they were starting like two number 2 safeties. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is going to open up all the passing game, which previously had not worked in the game. They're going to play, light cover 2 and just kind of let us dink and dunk our way down the field. It never materialized. The pass rush was so quick on Rodgers that he couldn't throw the ball. Aaron Jones fumbles on our own 10-yard line. And then to come back at the end of it, and Equinemius St. Brown drops a 2-point conversion that's right in his breadbasket. And then Kevin King holds a receiver on a ball that was so badly overthrown over Tyler Johnson's head. I mean, an argument could be made that it was uncatchable too. But I mean, it was so badly thrown that even if he hadn't held, it would not have mattered at all. It was never getting completed. We 100% should have had the opportunity to get that ball back and come down the field and score and see if we could win it or tie it up. But just dumb things that cost us again, just like usual. But we definitely had the team for it for once. And there wasn't so many injuries that you could excuse it. Because I was thinking Colton, during that Falcons game, by the end of the fourth quarter, we had LaTroy Guion, who was one of our defensive tackles. He was playing offensive line. We had so many injuries along the offensive line. It was one of the few times in recorded history that a defensive lineman has had to play offensive line in the middle of a playoff game.
Yeah.
And then I think what if for that, this is a little bit, what if Calvin Johnson had gone to the Packers? Because there was rumors that he wanted to, and that the Packers had kind of talked to him during the offseason, and Rodgers had, and the Lions didn't want him to go to an in-division rival. So that's why they held on to his contract, and then he retired. And he stated afterwards that he would have liked to have played with Aaron Rodgers. So I kind of always wondered about that, because I mean, Megatron could have been playing until probably it was 33 or something like that easily with his athleticism. And you put him and Devontae next to each other, that would have been insane. But
that would have been unfair.
Yeah. And then for my third one, this is a little bit random and might not be up you guys' alley, but when the Blackhawks let Artemi Panarin go, they traded him for basically peanuts away to the Columbus Blue Jackets. I mean, he was an up-and-coming Russian young, 24-year-old at the time being, 25-year-old on our team who had great chemistry on our top line with Patrick Kane, and they were putting up historic seasons together. And then we just went and let him go for virtually nothing because we said we didn't have the cap space for him, even though he said that he wanted to work with us on a deal. And we've never been able to find more playmakers, and Kane's gotten older and Taves has gotten older, and we just don't have the players around him to really make up for that, except for DeBrincat. So that was a big one to me that really sucked. I remember reading about that. And I guess for my last what if, this isn't about my team, but I was thinking about this. What if Odell Beckham had a rapport with Baker Mayfield, and he was still doing 1,500-yard seasons and stuff like he did with old Eli Manning? How different would the AFC North look? Because as it is, the Browns can barely eke out wins, and they're relying on Jarvis Landry to catch 8-yard catches one at a time. How different would that be if Odell was like a boss and just destroying people? Injuries.
It'd make all the difference, but like you said, their injury right now. I saw their injury report the other day. They had 12 guys that contribute injured out for the game yesterday, and they still won.
Yeah,
but their offense already has two really, really impressive players in general on their running backs. They're probably the best running back duo in the league.
I know. I can't believe that Dearness Johnson, their third stringer, was just he could be a number 2, maybe even a number 1 on a lot of other teams.
Mm.
That's crazy.
That's for sure. But
well, for my worst, it was a lot easier to find worse. I'm not as unfortunate that I've never seen my team win a championship, but I've seen very, very few of my teams win championships. So my number 3 worst was the 2020 Braves blowing a 3-1 lead. I really hope it doesn't happen again. It's possible to happen again. I hope it doesn't, but it's scaring me. But either way, it was heartbreaking. You see the Braves finally get good again. And then honestly, the reason they blew it last year is because it was a COVID year and there was no home field advantage. I really do believe that. But they blew it last year. Number 2 was the Blair Walsh game. It's not number 1. It made me really, really pissed off when it happened. I chucked my hat across the whole entire house. I've never thrown my hat that far in my life. I was really mad, but the thing is, looking back, I'm like, that Vikings team was not going anywhere past that first round of the playoffs anyway, like past the second round of the playoffs anyways, so it didn't really make that big of a difference in the grand scheme of things. Number 1 is actually going to tie into my biggest what if as well. The 2009 NFC Championship game, Vikings Saints Bounty Gate. As a Vikings fan, this game is the most pissed off I've ever been in my entire life. There's an emotional reason, a sports reason involved in this. So I remember exactly where I was. I was sitting in my house in Tennessee. We had me, my dad, my uncle, my grandfather. We were all 4 sitting in front of the TV, just watching this game. And my dad made a comment saying, looks like they're trying to absolutely kill Favre today. And usually, before this year, I would have been happy with that statement because I hated Brett Favre before this year because he played for the Packers for years. But this year, he literally was the reason the Vikings were as good as they were.
And Sidney Rice.
He made Sidney Rice. But either way, Brett Favre gets killed over and over and over again and actually stays out of the game. He gets knocked out of the game for half of the last drive in regulation. And I really do believe the Vikings were the best team that year in the NFL. They had a couple of losses because of a couple of big injuries in the regular season, but they were healthy. They were rocking. They had just crushed the Cowboys the game before, 35-3. And they were leading that game for most of the game. There are a couple games there's a couple moments that stood out besides just the Bounty Gate stuff. I mean, Adrian Peterson fumbling on the goal line was huge. And the Vikings lost the turnover battle, if I'm not mistaken, like 5-2 that day or something like that.
Ugh.
And they still went to overtime and had a chance to win it as well at the end. Favre throws it across his body in a stupidity moment. But I really do believe a lot of that was based on him getting absolutely destroyed and not wanting to run 5 yards in front of him.
I agree. I was about to say, I mean, I don't think you can, some of those bad decisions that people blame Favre there for, I don't know if you can blame him for.
Yeah. But either way, then, I mean, the reason it was an emotional big moment for me, it was the last time my grandfather ever watched a Vikings game because he passed away that summer. Like, what a crappy way to see your team that you've picked and you dealt with for years to go out. And also then in the offseason, you hear about what the Saints were doing, literally paying their players to kill Brett Favre. Other quarterbacks throughout the year, but Brett Favre was like the biggest bounty of all of them. It just pissed me off. And because I really do believe, coming into what if, I really do believe Minnesota probably beats that Colts team by 17 to 21 points. The Colts team that year did not have much of a defense. They kind of feasted on the Patriots team was not very good that year either. And you had a few injuries on that Patriots team as well. So they would kind of feast on a pretty easy AFC that year. And I really just believe Minnesota is a better team than New Orleans, and New Orleans won that by 2 touchdowns. So I really do believe that would have been Minnesota's first Super Bowl. But it's what it is. I mean, my last 2 what ifs aren't really as big of a deal. I like one more football one in my what if was Case Keenum throwing that pick 6 in 2017 in the NFC Championship game. If that doesn't happen, I mean, all the momentum in the world was in Minnesota following the Minneapolis Miracle. They go down, they score a touchdown, they get a stop. They've got all the momentum in the world, and then Keenum gets hit. His arm gets hit from behind, throws a pick 6, and Minnesota ended up losing that game by like 30 points. And I know I've talked to Colton about this multiple times. I really do believe that Vikings team was better than the Eagles that year. If they play that game, if they play that game 10 times, Minnesota probably wins that 6 or 7 times.
I
They
remember
definitely had like a massively better defense.
Exactly.
I remember vividly that like right before a day or two before the game, you and I talked on the phone, and I just had a great feeling that the Vikings are going to win that game. Like I was confident. I was like, with the momentum from the Miracle in Minneapolis, I was like, they're definitely going to win this game, no doubt.
And then you realize you never root for the Vikings. And then my last what if is a completely different sport. It's a NASCAR one, actually. I grew up loving NASCAR, learned how to count with the NASCAR. So I was the biggest Dell Jr. fan you'll ever meet in your entire life at the time. And one moment, it was probably the moment I remember most as a young kid. When Dell Jr. decides to wreck himself to stay on the lead lap in the middle of the championship battle when he's winning the championship race. He just docked 50 points and still falls off the lead lap, so it didn't even work. And then he ends up losing the championship by about 100 points. It was his best year of his entire career. If he doesn't spin himself, how much different is the season? I mean, because he ended up struggling a couple races after that with momentum stuff too. So I was hoping I could see Dell Jr. win a championship, and he never got one in his career. So that's one of my biggest what ifs.
I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
So my third one, so my first and third kind of go hand in hand. And I mean, it's not hard to pick my first. All right. So my third is in 2017, the Falcons it was the season after they lost the Super Bowl, and they were back in the playoffs, and they played the Eagles, and they only lost by, it was 15-10. The Falcons I'm pretty sure they had first and goal at one point. Yeah, the first and goal. It was 4th and goal from the 5-yard line. Matt Ryan's rush flushes to the right, throws it to Julio Jones.
And he dropped it.
Maybe it was a smidge bit high, but it hit him in the hands. And a receiver of that caliber, you got to catch that ball. It goes through his hands. Falcons lose. And looking back at it, they were the closest team to beating the Eagles that year on their way to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So that, in my opinion, that's a what if. I'm not saying that I don't think the Falcons would have been able to beat the Vikings in Minneapolis based off the momentum they would have had from the game before. But, I mean, you never know. I mean, you never know based off just the history of what's happened to those two teams in the past before. Sorry, Elijah, kicking field goals. Mm-hmm. But my number 2 is huge, and it really aggravates me because I'll tell you in a sec. So Tyler Simmons offside. So to make that make more sense. So in 2018 national championship game when Georgia played Alabama, when Georgia was up early in the game, it was around the second quarter. Tyler Simmons is a gunner, and he rushed a punter and blocked the punt. He was called offsides, but there's a screenshot of a picture of when he started and when the ball was hiked, and he was not offsides. And then about 6 months after Georgia lost the national championship game, the ref came out and said that he was not offsides and that it was a bad call. And if he would not have been called offsides, Georgia would have got a short field, and even if they kicked the field goal, they would have won the national championship. So for me, that's a huge what if, because he doesn't call that penalty, which shouldn't have been a penalty anyways. Georgia would be national champions, and Kirby would be going for his second this year instead of attempting to win his first. So to me, that's a huge what if. And Georgia was up 20-7, which 13 points isn't a lot, but when you have a 2-touchdown lead on Alabama, it's kind of frustrating. But obviously the biggest one, 28-3, Tom Brady. He's down 28-3, and I watched it with one of my best friends from back home, who Elijah knows, named Darius, who's Patriots fan. So we watched it together, and he actually named our fantasy league 28-3. So it will never escape my sports life. Oh, I was just kidding. It's awful. But my biggest what if with that is Julian Edelman off a man's foot. Julian Edelman caught a ball off of one of our defenders' foot. I think it was Robert Alford or Count. I think it was Alford. I'm pretty sure he caught the ball. Yeah. Caught it off of the guy's foot. Like, what kind of luck does Tom Brady? He always gets just the most ridiculous luck, I swear. I know he's a GOAT and everything. That's just so annoying. Anyways, with that said, that's my biggest what if and my biggest and worst sports memory, because up 28-3, I was sitting there confident we're going to have a Super Bowl in Atlanta. And then after they scored the first touchdown, I was like, okay, this is Tom Brady. I have no clue what's about to happen, but it's probably not looking good. Second touchdown, I was like, all right, this isn't good. And then when it went to overtime, I knew that the game was over. So that's my official worst memory. And I still haven't seen my team win a championship. So, you know, it is rough, but we're here. Yeah, the biggest choke in probably sports history, to be honest.
I would agree, probably. I mean,
It's almost as bad as Bills losing 4 straight Super Bowls. Just that one is that bad.
Yeah.
And it's depression.
Yeah. And we won the playoffs once since that year. And that's when we lost the Eagles. So.
Well,
super.
Well, that was a good conversation. You all finally get to see what has shaped our fanhood and our thought processes now. Hopefully, for me and Colton specifically, we change our number one best moment ever in a week and a half with the Braves winning a World Series, but also we could add probably number one on our most disappointing moments ever. Well, for me at least, if the Braves blew it. But either way, it's been a cool conversation. Excited for the next special podcast as well, because these make it a little bit more interesting where you don't know it's coming. And so yeah, I think it was a really cool time, and I want y'all to let us know what you all think is your all's best and worst moments of your sports fanhood.
And your biggest what ifs, because there's hundreds and hundreds upon thousands of what ifs in sports. So
definitely.
It's interesting to see what everyone thinks.
Well, until next time, peace out, guys.